Welcome to GMF's Transatlantic AI Conversations. I'm Karen Kornblue, co-host with Chris Schroeder of this series. And I'm thrilled to be speaking today with Elizabeth Kelly. She is the director of the U.S. Artificial Intelligence Safety Institute, which we'll be discussing today. Previously, she served as special assistant to the president for economic policy at the White House National Economic Council. And before that, she was in the private sector. Elizabeth was senior vice president of growth for Capital One Investing, which acquired United Income, a fintech startup that she helped grow as SVP of operations. So, Elizabeth, we started this series speaking with some of the major investors in this space and heard what I would say is sort of a grudging appreciation for the work that government officials have put into learning about the technology and partnering with industry to develop standards. And I say grudging because there's this feeling that among some that the government only comes in to stifle innovation. And there's a growing appreciation that government is really trying a new approach. And in many ways, the AI Safety Institute that you're standing up is a poster child for this kind of work, co-creating with industry guardrails and a new approach. So I know that you were an integral part of creating the Biden administration's AI executive order, and then you came in to stand up this new entity, and you've been running 1,000,000 miles a minute. And we're thrilled to have you and to hear about what you've been up to. So welcome.
Thank you. Thrilled to be here. Always great to spend time with you, Karen.
Thank you. So just to start and give us like an overview of what you see as the continuing challenges and opportunities and how these risks are evolving.
Sure. So I think most of the challenges and opportunities in AI really boil down to two factors. One is the incredibly fast pace of development, and two is the huge number of unanswered questions. We think back even in the last 18 months, 2 years, we've seen just massive advances in generative AI with everything from more sophisticated analytical skills to multimodal reasoning. I'm sure your prior guests went into all of this. But to me, those advances speak to really the huge promise of AI, to use the president's favorite description of it, to deliver enormous societally beneficial things like individualized education. In healthcare, we could see new drug discovery and development, early detection of illnesses, reduced clinician burnout. In climate, new tools around weather prediction, carbon capture and storage. The list goes on and on. But as the capabilities and hence the benefits increase, also do the risks. For example, at AI Safety Institute, we're thinking about things like, could these models develop capabilities that pose a threat to national security, like significantly lowering the barrier to development of biological weapons, perpetuating cyber attacks. And assessing these risks is made all the more challenging, not only by the speed of development, which I fully expect to continue, but also by the questions like why new capabilities emerge, what dictates these changes, how do we extrapolate what AI generates in a sterile environment to interactions with the outside world? And it's not just government that's grappling with these questions. As we engage with developers of AI models, it's clear that they themselves cannot answer a lot of these questions. Now, we're certainly seeing improvements, interpretability, explainability, leaps and bounds, but the vast array of unknowns is still very much a consideration. And it creates unique governance challenges, too. I know you were a student of technology, Karen, and have seen lots of evolution in terms of how we've responded to the internet, social media, other advances. But it used to be that when government controlled frontier technology, like nuclear research, that was a different set of governance challenges. It was in the hands of government. Here, most frontier AI development is occurring behind closed doors in the hands of private sector companies. And that creates fundamentally new questions for how government should think about oversight, innovation, all of the things that are sort of core to our mission of serving the American people.
And what do you see as the primary role of government in ensuring this responsible use of AI?
So I think it's useful to distinguish between policy around the applications or use of AI versus policy around the development of AI. And if you'll permit me for a second, I well, the president's executive order, which probably many of your viewers have read at this point, but I won't assume all they have. For whatever its benefits, brevity was not among them, that it's 116 pages are only now fitting into the larger context windows that we're seeing from generative AI tools. But I really think about the executive order in three different buckets. The first is around how do we encourage innovation? And I do think this is actually a role for government in ensuring the responsible use of AI by making sure that we're continuing to stay at the frontier, which is so important geopolitically, but also that we're spurring beneficial use cases of AI, making sure that we have a robust and competitive ecosystem, that we're putting money towards R&D, that we're leading as a consumer of AI, using it to better serve the public. And that's a large portion of the EO. And then a lot of it also focused on applications and directed agencies to use their substantial existing authorities in fields ranging from healthcare to competition to transportation to protect against the risks of AI while harnessing its benefits. And there, I think it's important to note that these are already laws that are on the books. They are operating as intended. We're just saying that there's no AI exception to the laws that are on the books. And because we have a new tool, doesn't mean that the projections change. But for the underlying frontier models and systems, which is what we're focusing on at the AI Safety Institute, there the executive order really puts us on an intensive information gathering mission. We're not regulating, we're collecting information about the existence of more powerful models, the capabilities and risks they pose, what risk mitigations work, and using all of that to inform voluntary guidance. And I think this approach really reflects our belief that the state of AI safety science is still very nascent. It hasn't been systematized and matured in the way that it needs to be. And that only once we have more information and a more robust science of measurement, the specialty of NIST, where the AI Safety Institute is headquartered, will we really be able to see what risks exist and what their magnitudes are. And that's the information that we need to ultimately inform regulation, legislation, the things that are going to be coming down the pike.
That's great. That's so helpful to think about. And, it's interesting because while this is just an observation, but one of the things we heard from some of the folks in Silicon Valley is, well, before you pass new laws, why don't you just, there's so many dangers that people talk about with AI that are already illegal. And they were kind of surprised to hear, yes, that's exactly the approach of the Biden administration, that Congress hasn't passed a new law. So they did use existing laws and said, how do we make sure they're updated? How do we make sure enforcement is there? So thanks for explaining that. Tell us a little bit more about the AI Safety Institute. Just maybe you can just unpack what you're doing a little bit, key issues that you're focused on. And then if you want to get into this vision that you released of a global network for AI safety.
Sure. So our mission at the AI Safety Institute, or AC as we call it, is to advance the science of AI safety at the same time advance the implementation and adoption of that science. We, and indeed the entire Biden administration, firmly believe that safety breeds trust, trust breeds adoption, and adoption accelerates innovation, and enabling that innovation through safety is our North Star. At the Safety Institute, we're undertaking three main pillars of work to achieve this goal. First, we're focused on direct testing of AI models, systems, and agents. We're going to build out a suite of evaluations to use as data on how AI models perform, what capabilities they exhibit, and what risks are posed by these capabilities. AC is going to house entirely new U.S. government capability to directly test frontier AI models and systems before deployment across a range of risks. We are in our initial pilot stage and will be focused especially on capabilities that could pose a threat to national security, including, as I mentioned, the risk of severely lowering the barriers to development of chemical or biological weapons or perpetuating cyber attacks. But we'll also be looking at the societal harms perpetuated by frontier models and systems. And we're going to be sharing feedback with the model developers on where mitigations may be needed prior to deployment. We really view this as a research partnership as we're working together to answer a lot of the questions that remain open. Second, we're going to be issuing guidance across a range of topics, including guidance on where developers can plan for safety and security mitigations to prevent malicious use, guidance on the tools and techniques that are available today to help detect synthetic content and to authenticate content. The goal here is really to spur a robust ecosystem, both of independent research and evaluation, as well as tools and guidance that both third-party evaluators and in-house evaluators can rely on. The task here is so large that it should not be left solely to government. And we want to make sure that we're really nurturing and fostering that broader ecosystem of safety. Finally, we'll be doing fundamental technical research on questions surrounding, for example, the interoperability of AI models, R&D around potential new and improved risk mitigations. The field is evolving so quickly, and we really believe that our work must be iterative and adaptive. We want to have a virtuous cycle of doing research, issuing guidance, learning from real-world use and testing, so we can continue to improve across the board and really help advance our understanding of these models and promote AI safety generally.
So, Elizabeth, this is super technical and it's so much work. Have you had to really hire a lot and build up, or was the capability there at NIST already? How are you keeping up with the fast developments in the industry?
So we are very fortunate to have a wonderful group of folks at NIST who have been leading such important work as the AI RMF and path-breaking evaluations on things like facial recognition, fingerprinting, other things. But we've also made a number of key hires. The head of evaluations from my team is someone who actually stood up the safety team at OpenAI. We were attracting terrific talent out of PhD programs and other top universities. And in addition to the technical folks we're hiring, we're really making sure to have diverse voices at the table and keep in mind what this means for people. It's part of why my leadership team includes an ethicist and anthropologist, as well as many computer scientists.
That's great. And for those who don't know, the RMF is the risk mitigation framework that NIST had even before the AI Safety Institute was stood up. So I guess had in-house capabilities when you came in.
Thank you, Karen. I've clearly been in government too long and resorting to the alphabet soup.
So let's just take it globally for a minute, if you don't mind, just because we are the German Marshall Fund. The AI Safety Institute released this vision that I mentioned of a global network for AI safety last month. And we'd love to hear about what that is, how it would work, and what initial steps you're going to take to launch that collaboration.
Sure. So as the German Marshall Fund knows well, AI is really a global technology that requires global solutions. And that's why we think that our work with allies and partners in the launching of this safety network are so core to what we're doing and to our ultimate success. Our goal for this AC network, as we're calling it in shorthand, is to bring together AI safety institutes and other government-backed scientific offices doing that work, building on the leaders and ministers level commitments that have been made at Bletchley Park and in Seoul, but really aimed at enabling the technical experts to get together and work on a more granular level. We hope that the network is going to yield agile information exchange, resource sharing that will yield significant efficiencies in research. This technology is moving so quickly, and what's being spent on AI safety is a fraction of what's being spent on AI development. So I really believe that we need to be pooling resources, learning from each other's work, taking advantage of what's happening globally, rather than duplicating. We should be standing on each other's shoulders. And in this close partnership, the hope is that we're going to facilitate alignment of AI safety policies across participating countries, help move towards common or fully compatible evaluations and standards, which we think are really important for enabling innovation to thrive, which is all of our North Star. We've already established collaborations with the UK, EU, Japan, Kenya, Singapore, and are really looking forward to building out this network to a wide variety of partners that brings in lots of expertise, resources, talent. I would say I think it's especially important that partners in the developing world have a seat at the table, so that as we're doing this work, we can ensure that the benefits of AI for economic and social prosperity reach countries at all levels of development in all regions of the world, and ultimately help ensure that AI benefits all of us rather than exacerbating inequalities, threatening human rights, or causing other harms. As we've shared publicly, we're hoping to catalyze this work by convening AI safety institutes and other stakeholders later this year in the San Francisco area to launch this network. We see this really as a new phase of international coordination on AI safety, science, and governance that will enable like-minded nations to set the rules of the road for AI developers globally, regardless of where they deploy their models, and ultimately make it more likely that AI safety standards are followed throughout the world.
Are there aspects of AI governance that you think can be standardized on a global level, whereas there are other areas where countries are going to diverge, even while they maintain these shared core principles?
So I think about this in concentric circles. Yeah. I think that there are narrower sets of issues where we will have some divergence, in part because some countries are taking sort of an EO-based approach, like we are. Others are introducing legislation, and each comes with its own sort of set of tools and pluses and minuses. But I think we've seen at Bletchley Park, at the Seoul Summit, with the UN GA resolution, that we can get broad alignment globally on how do we prevent misuse of the technology, how do we ensure it's operating as intended. These are some of the really key principles where I think we're going to see a lot of global alignment, even as some of the details about applications, use cases may differ in different countries.
And with regard to Europe specifically, so there's been a lot of attention focused on Europe's new AI Act. And that's something that was developed over a long period of time, before the latest versions of large language models were commercialized. How do you see the U.S. interacting with that new law? How do you see your work dovetailing or not with what the EU is doing, as our close ally? How does that fit in with this global picture?
Sure. So the biggest difference, obviously, is sort of in the regulation of the use cases of AI.
Yeah.
And there, the EU took a much more sort of horizontal approach, looking at high-risk use cases across the board, whereas in the executive order, we relied on sort of our vertical regulators in healthcare and financial services. This speaks to both the fact that we were operating under executive authorities, but also to sort of our traditional way of operating within the US system. So I think that's the biggest difference. And we're still seeing how that will play out in the EU. It's very early days as they work to implement this act. Where I see a lot of commonality is around the approach to the underlying frontier models, where the EU has sort of made a distinction between the less capable models and the more capable models. They use 10 to the 25th flops. We use 10 to the 26th flops, but you see some similarities in approach. And where they're focused more on sort of a voluntary code of conduct, transparency requirements, similar to what we're doing for the underlying models and systems. And I think that's laid the groundwork for a really rich collaboration around the frontier models. And that's part of why we announced the Trade Technology Council that there will be this EU AI office, Department of Commerce dialogue, aimed at answering questions around benchmarks and capabilities, testing and evaluations. We're just kicking off this dialogue, but I think we're really excited for the collaboration and the results that will come from it.
That sounds great. Open models. There's a lot of dialogue about open models, whether they pose additional safety questions or, in fact, are safer because they're more transparent. Is there a different kind of approach for open models at AI? How do you pronounce it?
AC is the short version.
AC. Okay, sorry.
No, there's no. The fun part is that, like, for example, I think the UK calls theirs the UKC. The Canadians are calling theirs the KC. There's all types of fun word plays here.
All right. Well, AC, how are you thinking about open models?
So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that my colleagues at the National Telecommunications Information Administration, or NTIA, have really been heads down on this question. They were tasked by the executive order with putting out a report on open weight models that'll overview the benefits, risks, and policy options. That's due at the end of July, 270 days after EO was issued. So I would refer folks to that report when it comes out. But in general, I'd note that we certainly recognize that open models can make AI's benefits more accessible, increase competition, diversify and stimulate AI research and innovation, including really crucial AI safety and security research. But we also know that open models introduce potential risks around public safety and national security, and that a model's level of openness no doubt changes the calculus of AI safety considerations. So, for example, malicious actors could augment open model weights to create more dangerous systems by stripping existing safeguards or fine-tuning models on extreme data sets. These actions, the systems created, are then difficult to monitor, oversee, and control. At the AI Safety Institute, we will be incorporating the nuances of model weight access into our testing, research, and guidance. And of course, as frontier AI continues to develop, we're going to be assessing the implications of open models and AI safety, but there's still a lot of open questions.
Okay, so we'll have to get NTIA after their deadline is over.
Hopefully it'll be shorter than EO.
Exactly. So what advice would you give to the stakeholders throughout the AI ecosystem as they think about their own responsible AI policies and adoption of AI, and also how they interact with the government?
So one, I would just say stay informed. AI is developing so quickly, and the latest research coming out of labs or academia, new insights on podcasts like your earlier guests. I think it's almost a full-time job to keep up to date on everything that's happening, but I think it's really important as you're thinking about your own responsible AI policies and adoption. Otherwise, it can very quickly become out of date. 6 months is sort of light years in the pace of AI development. I also think it's really important to make sure that policies and practices around AI adoption and use are informed by diverse perspectives and keep real people in mind. We have a pretty amazing opportunity here to try and shape this trajectory of this technology in a way that uplifts humanity. And we have numerous examples of where we haven't gotten the balance quite right. I think there's a lot of people who would say that mistakes were made in terms of how we think about internet regulation and some of the harms we're seeing now. And so really bringing in those diverse perspectives, it's part of why, as I said, my team includes an ethicist and an anthropologist to make sure that we're considering all the perspectives that need to be at the table. And lastly, and I know this is perhaps playing to audience, but I think it's so important to take an international view here. This is really a global technology, and we're seeing different regulatory regimes pop up, new safety institutes across the globe, as well as a lot of questions around data centers, energy consumption, training data, all of which have a lot of really profound international and geopolitical implications that I think are worth keeping top of mind.
It's so interesting that you say you have an anthropologist on your staff. I was just listening to someone talking about how could we have known in the early days of the internet or social media that these siloed groups would be formed that would, be pitted against each other. And I thought back to historians I knew who warned me of exactly that. So it's fantastic that you're bringing social scientists into the process at the very beginning to see around those corners. That's fantastic. I cannot imagine how busy you are, given all the things you just told us that you're trying to pull together on top of staying abreast of all the new developments. As you said, it's a full-time job. Just to close this out and let you get back to your work, maybe you can share with us some content that you'd advise others turn to if they do want to keep up to date and they do want to stay abreast of developments. It could be a movie, a book, an article. We'd be really grateful for any tips.
Sure. So one of the things I think is most helpful is just sort of a good explainer on like the nuts and bolts of it all. Um, and Tim Berners-Lee has a good, I don't know, 70-page webpage called Large Language Models Explained with a Minimum of Math and Jargon. That I think is just like a good sort of accessible technical explanation of how all of this fits together that I would recommend to folks as a bit of a primer for the non-engineer listeners.
Great.
I also think that the Import AI newsletter is a great source of information, something I read each week. And there's been a lot of really good podcasts. Ezra Klein's has done a number of deep dive segments on AI that I found to be really thoughtful. There was an interesting piece on NVIDIA and on How I Built This podcast, which do a good job going into both the history and where it will be going from here.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and good luck with all your work. We're all relying on you.
Thank you so much. Always great to be with you, Karen.
Thank you.